Hello, everybody. Welcome to the McEwen NDP podcast. I'm the club VP of social media. Joining me today is my good friend Jessica Littlewood. Jessica is the former MLA of Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville, my riding, and is also the co-chair of the Alberta NDP Rural Caucus. Jessica, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. The rain has stopped, so this is the perfect time to do it outside.
Exactly. Well, hopefully it stays that way. Hopefully it stays that way.
I think we're good. Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting. I'm so glad that you've taken this on as as one of many responsibilities as a student to be politically engaged, because politics have a huge impact on what's going on your campus right now, especially with COVID. My gosh.
Absolutely, no, it's and definitely, and that's been a big hot button issue for us. But that's what the club's about. It's about trying to get students involved, trying to get them to advocate for their own interests, and showing them avenues which they can get involved. With the NDP to bring about that progressive change. So just to start out, how about you tell us a little bit about your kind of yourself? What made you decide to run for the Alberta NDP in the first place? Back in 2015.
Absolutely. Well, like many people who have run and gotten elected, it really came down to friends asking me to get involved. So this will be like my first pitch to anyone that watches your video is please get involved.
Yes.
Please run. Yeah. Please join a constituency association. Come knock some doors. Because really, like, as an aside, people like political parties are out there knocking doors because people want to get their message heard. They want to get, they want to find out where their support is. And if people aren't doing that, there are more insidious powers that will do that work, and we'll find that, we'll push their message. So that's that door knocking was how I got involved. It was a door knocking campaign actually out in Sarah Hoffman's constituency over in Edmonton and Glenora. And so it was something about healthcare. I can't remember exactly what it was, but obviously something that matters a lot to Alberta's NDP. And so I was, getting brought in and converted to the ways of being involved with politics. And so just because I was involved, a friend of mine who was trying to recruit female candidates was looking for more females to run, because the leader, Rachel Notley, who had just been elected leader, she wanted to make sure that half of the slate of candidates in Alberta were made up of females. And so I was asked to run in rural Alberta, and certainly that was a big whirlwind in and of itself. And so of course, it's important not just to recruit lots of candidates, but recruit candidates from lots of backgrounds. And, so we want to make sure that not only are we looking for female candidates, but we're looking for young candidates, candidates that are from gender diverse communities, people of different ethnic backgrounds, because, representation really matters. And because I know that that it takes on average 3 times to convince a woman to run, I will say out there to your folks, please run, please run, please run. Whether it's for student council or municipal politics or provincial politics or federal politics, like having having representation in all of those orders of government matters. And so I'll stop waxing about finding more candidates.
Oh, good. No, I think you really.
You ran for us, right?
Exactly. No, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that, like, I think you really hit on something good there, which is just, it's a lot. I think people kind of assume there's more of a barrier to getting involved, like to get really involved in politics. I myself ran for the federal NDP, of course, in the last federal election, and that was, like, I'm not a particularly, again, I'm a young college student, but I showed up to our federal EDA meeting. And
Yeah.
we're talking about candidates, and the idea was put forward. And and I think folks, because I've I get contacted every now and then, somebody asking, how do I get involved with the NDP? How do I, I'm tired of just sitting here and getting mad
Yeah,
at what the the ridiculous right-wing nonsense the UCP is up to. How do I
absolutely.
start fighting this fight? And so I think it's really important to show people just how accessible it is, whether it's getting involved in constituency association or taking a run for a level of public office. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it it bears repeating that you broke the double digits in Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan,
Although
which is
if
awesome.
granted, you did win, so I need to feel a little
You know,
results.
but you got back, I think it's 60% of our money that we spent
This is true.
not riding.
Every
That
year in a few.
matters. And you know what? It's not something that everybody has the gumption to do, right?
Yeah.
It is so powerful. And so, like I will wear it as like a badge of honor for forever that I like sort of strong-armed you into joining as a member of our constituency association, because we need more people that are familiar with what our ideas are, and so that you can articulate that to friends and family when people are talking about things that are important to them, because people want to know like what are positive solutions, right? They don't want to, like, it's really draining to be mad and to feel like you don't have enough agency in what's going on around you. So the more that we can let people know, like, hey, we have this, this great vision for how we can make things better. Like Heather McPherson is the NDP MP for Edmonton Strathcona, and so she was talking in the parliament like a month ago about ensuring that the government was putting forward funds to help with a back to school plan. And what that also necessarily means is a childcare plan, because lots of parents either will be sending their kids back to school and they want to know that they're safe. But that also means that we are going to experience childcare issues, right? And so these issues disproportionately impact women. Um, but because we have someone that is a woman, that is a mom, in the parliament fighting for these things, we were able to hear an announcement today about like the actual $2 billion being met out to the provinces in order to help make classrooms safe, and in order to make sure that uh, that that those plans when it comes to safety for COVID are being that those needs are better met. And so it's important to know that there are great solutions being put forward by New Democrats, and folks like you, when you go and do the forums and door knock and do that sort of canvassing, allows other people to know that those huge issues that they feel in their family are actually being thought about deeply by people who have the power to do something about it.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned kind of the story of how I got involved in politics there. I got an email saying, hey, we're having an annual general meeting. You're a member of the NDP. And I thought, I might go check that out. And, I came there, met Jessica, and I was blown away just by how down to earth the politician. I always had this sort of idea of, politicians as on this sort of pedestal. And so just to meet somebody, to meet a public representative who's just so down to earth, so, willing to talk to really anybody, and and she was very very persistent in recruiting me on the contingencies. But I'm so glad she did, because there's no way I would have gotten involved with any of this. And the other thing, so thank you very much for that, Jessica. And the other thing too is, you brought up the $2 billion that have been allocated from the federal government to provinces to help better prepare for schools. But of course the feds can write a check, but it is ultimately up to the provincial government to effectively spend that. And
Yes.
do you think, with Jason Kenney and with our education minister, Adriana, that that money's in good hands, given given what's been what's been done so far with the back to school planning? Because there are a lot of concerns, particularly in this province, that just they're kind of leaving the schools out to dry, really.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the granular stuff about this is unfortunate because the schools have, or I should say the school boards are saying that they don't actually want to make changes at this point. They're saying, we came, like the province said you have to provide for A, B, and C, which was like, you know, these are the age groups that are going to require masks. It will be, Monday to Friday instruction. Try to accommodate for families that want to keep their kids home if that is something that they prefer. Asking for them to have hand sanitizers, and have the ability to keep high contact surfaces clean. So really, really bare bones requirements. And so the feedback that we keep hearing is like, class sizes are an issue. Therefore the number of teachers are an issue. How will we deal with if someone gets sick and they need a substitute? Do we have enough substitute teachers in the system to accommodate that? And today, what is being discussed is whether or not substitute teachers will be allowed to work at various schools. Because of course we saw that with healthcare professionals, they were, by the province, required to only work at a single site so that they wouldn't potentially be visiting multiple sites if they were an asymptomatic carrier and creating a much larger issue to contend with. And so the teachers now have to think about how they tackle that issue. And it's hard to say what the province will do with that extra funding, because they haven't really said what they would do with that funding, because that would work out to, I don't know, somewhere in the realms of maybe $150 to $200 million, right? If you divide it once you divide it out, and which is a lot of money. That's no small amount of change. I think Ontario was at the higher end of where they were reallocating more money into education to deal with having a safe return in September. However, in Alberta, the government has been consistently cutting the budget since the last NDP budget. So the budget that we passed in 2018-2019 was something that's still funded for growth. But then with the UCP won last year and they put out a 2019-2020 budget, it effectively cut funding. It effectively meant that there was less funding per student coming in. There was no new funding coming for new students coming into the system. And so we have 15,000 more students that have come into the system that didn't have any funding to follow them. So, and back in the spring, they cut 25,000 education staff, right? Between educational assistants, maintenance staff. I mean, who in their right mind as a decision maker says that they're going to cut the people who keep a school clean during a pandemic? Like the extent to which they are committing themselves to cut budgets in the name of keeping taxes low is just ludicrous. Like it goes against all rational thought. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with that money. I would assume that they're going to put it into the education budget and hope that they are going to run maybe like less of a deficit, but like that money is not intended for like a deficit. That money is intended to be operationalized for COVID needs. And so I will be looking towards people like the trustees, the educational trustees, and the Alberta Teachers Association, looking for real advocacy for how they see firsthand how that money should be spent.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, like you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, you mentioned before, like they, you know, back in the spring, I forget which month, but when they did this mass layoff of EAs and of, you know, custodians as well for schools, again in the middle of a pandemic, and you know, and Jason Kenney in the legislature saying his response to how classrooms can remain clean enough for students to be safely be in there. Oh well, you know, teachers can, you know, they can do it. You know, they're, you know, come on, they can tidy up a little. Like they can tidy up. They, yeah, that's not their job.
Yeah. As if any you know, school, I don't want to use the wrong word, but maintenance workers, as if anybody cleaning a school sees the very specific training that they have as being tidying up. Like, do you really think that a person doing that job thinks that they're going in to tidy up? No, they're going in to like make sure that people are not getting infected. Like they see a public service role as like potentially saving lives. They're not just tidying up. So and I mean, but this is the same sort of people, you know, Jason Kenney and people that think like him, that see teaching as child minding. They don't actually see it as a service that is like educating and allowing us to have like subsequent generations be good learners, be good citizens, be, you know, have critical thinking skills. They just think that teachers are babysitters, and that's why, like, that is a very common trope that they try to use in order to justify cutting their salaries, cutting their pensions, cutting, you know, cutting sick time, whatever it is that they can try and do to lower taxes, which like really just hurts everyone. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
Oh no, well, it hurts everybody except for the folks, the
Right.
corporate, so sweet corporate taxes,
The
which
rich.
supposed
Yeah.
to create all these jobs as they talked about in the campaign. Except we're so
Where are the jobs?
even before the
Where are the
pandemic,
jobs?
the pandemic, before the pandemic, I mean, that, like, his campaign promises were, you know, like out of the question that he'd be able to keep that with that job creation tax credit, because I mean, you give these massive tax handouts to these corporations. The You know, they talk about how financially, the UCP loves to go on about financial literacy. Oh, the NDP, they weren't economically literate.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
understand how business works. They understand how, you know, the market works. Well, the profit motive right now is really was not to hire more people into oil sands. The profit motive was to put money into foreign stock buybacks and shoring out the company's dividends.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
the profit motive was. But of course, they don't see that. I mean, you know, again, I was interviewing Ron Theroux, who is a businessman who, you know, I ran against. We had a friendly rivalry going. You know, and he said, you know, frankly, I just don't, you know, business wise, I just don't know how savvy these people are. But like, but as far as them, fire, like, eh, they cut, these austerity measures that lead to, tax cuts that lead to them trying to lower the deficit, which so far has not been a success by any
Nope.
means. Deficits went up under them prior to the pandemic. But
For the first time, we are a have-not province.
yes, exactly. And I think that ultimately, if I were to summarize the problems with the UCP in maybe one sentence, that they just have no long-term planning. Everything is about, short-term gains, which sometimes in this particular case aren't even gains. But just temporary short-term success. But as far as down the line, when it comes to our energy economy, they'll occasionally pay lip service to diversification, but they've completely torn apart any environmental leadership brought in by the NDP.
Oh yeah, and gone beyond, right? They're using COVID as a means to do, like, what people refer to as shock doctrine. So they're using COVID as an excuse to suspend environmental monitoring on oil sands. They're using the COVID as an excuse to immediately reduce corporate taxes to 8%. 8%, and they're complaining about their quarterly their fiscal update right now. They're saying, "Oh my gosh, we have no money coming in." It's like, well, that's because you just, like, told corporations that they don't have to pay their freight. They don't have to uh, pay for the things that provide good services to allow them to have healthy workers, educated workers, roads to drive on, and all the things that allow them to do business in the province. They're saying you don't have to pay your way like you did before.
Well, exactly. And I mean, and you touch on something there, which is folks, as of course, you were a rural MLA and are the co-chair of the Rural NDP Caucus. So, when you watch the UCP tell oil companies, oh, you don't have to pay your taxes to rural municipalities, and instead they're being, folks in these constituencies are being footed with the bill. I
Yes.
mean, that they're just being completely, screwed over by our tax system right now because they won't, companies just don't have to pay their way, or specific companies rather, not even all companies.
Yeah.
And there was a protest not that long ago at the legislature. MLA Lauren Dack attended that, which was about that very issues. You talked about lower tax, we're getting taxed more. Well, these
Yeah.
companies aren't paying a dime. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty stunning the costs that have gone up since the UCP took power. Insurance rates are skyrocketing. Uh, Oil and gas leaseholders don't have to pay the owing taxes on their leases on rural land across the province. Uh, that has been doubled down upon by the promise from the government is that they're going to change the taxation system that is applied to oil and gas assets that are underground, I believe, and the way that they want to change it is to, of course, lower it, which would mean that the counties that are responsible for those areas now have to make up the difference by increasing taxes on either the businesses or the residences or both. And so, because the costs of looking after rural Alberta don't go away, right? People have to still be able to um, traverse on highways. People have to be able, like, to get in and out of their homes on rural roads. The gravel still has to get purchased and graded and all the things, and culverts still need to get built. So these costs aren't going away, but the means to tax for them are going away. And so it's it will be interesting to see what happens. I know that they're changing their municipal affairs minister right now because I don't think the relationship between the municipal affairs minister, Casey Madu, and the municipal representative organizations was good, because obviously a lot of these things still continue to get downloaded onto people in municipalities. But I don't know that it could improve under anyone, because whoever is in that portfolio is going to be tasked with telling municipalities that the province is downloading more onto them. And the wild thing is, today I heard that that the province is going to be issuing report cards on municipalities for whether they raise taxes on their citizens or not. Isn't that wild? So the province is downloading the costs of their of critical infrastructure onto the municipalities, but the municipalities are going to get a failing grade if they try to raise taxes to pay for it.
You know, I actually didn't hear about that. That was you say just today, was that?
Yeah.
Jeez. Like, I mean, that, you know, and that just, you know, and like you have to wonder if this is like almost just a part of this ideological agenda just to privatize everything. Because that's, I mean, when you won't let you won't give your municipalities the ability to fund things, you'll a lot more costs onto them, and then you'll give them a grade on whether or not they raise their taxes in order to increase the revenue in order to pay for everything that the bill that they're being footed with. You know,
right. And the idea that like, oh well, this is going to open up the landscape for business people to come and do business on like whatever gap is being left by publicly afforded means. But this is not a solution in rural Alberta, where you don't have the same economies of scale. So there's a reason why when you drive to Innisfree, that their roads are, not as well looked. Shouldn't say not as well looked after, because it's not their fault, but they're falling apart, right? You have more roads that get turned from like pavement to asphalt to gravel, because the cost of upkeep becomes so onerous on the small populations of these areas. And so, lots of people that like live in Edmonton, or just live in more just areas where there's more people and there's more ability to raise taxes locally, there's a disconnect between what is happening in small municipalities that they don't see. So they don't see that grading of roads happens. They don't see that classrooms go from being a grade 5 and a grade 6 to being a 5-6 split. And then the next year it becomes a 4-5-6 split. Then the year after that, there's a 4-5-6 split, but there's also a 1-2-3 split. So that understanding is so important when people are talking about policies that are created and have disproportionate effects where it gets rolled out. So the ability to raise taxes locally and getting a bad grade, and which is obviously intended to, what do I think is going to happen? I think the government is going to tie the ability for them to ask for funds from the provincial government to their report card. And also what you do is you start creating these very strained relationships between local residences and their councils. And so, they're going to try and vote out and vote in new councils and hope that somebody can can rectify these issues, but it just creates like internal conflict, like worse conflict in these areas. And so, like, what are they really after? I don't know. You know, for sure they're after privatization. So, you know, one of the things that we're going to talk about is the doctor issue, right?
Yeah.
So the government has torn up the contract with doctors. They passed a law which is totally unconstitutional, like totally unconstitutional. And so, you know, the government is saying, oh, it's because the doctors, they just, all they care about is money, and, you know, it's all about the money, when it's not about the money at all. The doctors have in fact offered to cut their pay, and they've already cut their pay under the NDP. So, you know, I know how, I should say, I remember what a careful conversation that was between the NDP government and the doctors. And that's not to say that I support cuts. I just know that I was part of the government that did it. You know, the government was obviously trying to navigate the economy, like taking a huge hit over oil and gas revenues. And so they were trying to be responsible, and that's what they believed being responsible was. For myself, in hindsight, I don't think that cutting people's wages was a good thing. You know, doctors have, I should do a better job of staying on topic, but doctors have the responsibility of paying their staff, paying for their equipment, paying for their leases. Like, these things all come out of the fees that they charge, fees that like have not changed in a long, long time. So the doctors, because they were treated with respect by Sarah Hoffman, by Rachel Notley, they came to an agreement that would save, like, I think it was $500 million over 2 years. So what we're seeing now is that the government wants to, well, they've already torn up the contracts. They're accusing the doctors of not wanting to take a pay cut. They already took a pay cut, but they're actually saying that we would take a 5% pay cut. That's what they offered at the bargaining table. And the government walked away. They were like, no, that's not what we're after. Because really what they're after is to destroy the AMA, which has been recognized by law as a bargaining authority for doctors. And so they want to tear that up and force doctors to bargain on their own. And for anyone that's had a job where you don't have the power of collective bargaining, where you have to sit in management's office and argue for yourself and argue your own merits and your, you know, what you offer, you're not going to have the same bargaining power as bargaining with many. That's the whole point of having a union. It's the whole point of having an association. So if the government can force all of these doctors to have to bargain by themselves, then it is a race to the bottom on doctor salaries. But it's not just going to be the doctor salaries that we're going to see a race to the bottom on. We're going to see a race to the bottom on teacher salaries, because obviously the UCP want to have more private schools. We're going to see a race to the bottom on nurses' wages, because they want to open private surgery clinics, more private surgery clinics. I don't see a logical end to that sort of privatization in our hospitals. And what that does is that's a race to the bottom on nurses' wages, maintenance wages, like all of the people that you count on to have a successful surgery, a short recovery time, and no complications as a result, best case scenario, all of those things, all of those people that contribute to that are going to be making less. And so we're going to hope to get the same level of care with a race to the bottom on people's wages, which doesn't spell good things. And that is all aside from the fact that in Saskatchewan, where they've done this with privatizing hip and knee surgery, or I should say, they didn't privatize all of it, but they've allowed there to be a two-tier healthcare there. So you can pay and get it done faster, is that it ends up costing more in the long run because there are complications. Like if there are complications, they get dealt with in the public system. And the private system, it cherry picks the easiest cases. So they'll take all of the easy cases so that they can like bam, 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 right? Do like lots of surgeries in a day and get paid like per surgery. And then it means that the public system is left doing the surgeries that are more difficult. And so the promise of like a faster surgery, it starts to work at the front end, but then on the back end, we see those wait times start to go back up. And that is what's happening in Saskatchewan right now, where they have like tested this out. But when someone like Jason Kenney is so committed to this ideology, and they can go to the few doctors that want to open private surgery facilities, whether it's in like doing more hip and knee surgeries or whether it's doing eyeball surgeries. He has friends that have a lot of money in their pockets to donate to his campaign. So it's a really like short-term game of pay to play politics, where the government that then does whatever it is that they paid to the government to do, and we all get left hand like with the bag. We get left with two-tier healthcare. We get left with longer wait times. We get left with more expensive systems, because these things like, there's a reason why the system works better in Canada than in the States. And in the States, they pay like extraordinarily more for a system that, like, frankly, has not only not given good results over time and has left people without care, but it's also been I shouldn't say a complaint, but it's been disastrous in parts of the United States during COVID, right?
I would say I would call the entire system a disaster itself. Quite frankly, I wouldn't.
Like I don't want to say that it's all disastrous, because people are doing good work, right? There are people that are committed to doing what they can in a system that has not been built very well.
Yeah.
But when you don't know, as the state, if you don't know whether all of your intensive care unit beds are full because private hospitals don't have to tell you, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem, huge problem. And you start moving people from like, adult beds into children's hospital beds, because you're running out of space, because people weren't able to have better central management of their healthcare system or direction from the government. Obviously, we see like how disastrous it can be.
Oh yeah, and there's but that seems to be the exact system that the UCP is intent on running us towards. And you mentioned before that we've essentially been left with longer wait times. We've been left with cuts to paychecks. We've been left with there's one other thing we've been left with right now, and that is an exodus of rural physicians. This is something that MLA David Shepherd, who the opposition critic for healthcare, who is also the MLA of the riding which McEwen is in. Spoke
Edmonton Center. Yeah,
and we're Edmonton City. Thank you. And that's we're just seeing, frankly, the start of it. I mean, we're seeing doctors going to BC, to the Northwest Territories, to just getting out of Alberta,
to Newfoundland.
Just getting out of Alberta, and I'm sure these
Australia. There are doctors going to Australia. And this is literally, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is literally what just happened 25 years ago. In the 90s, we had a brain drain because there was a mass exodus of people because Ralph Klein was making huge cuts across the board. And so we are starting to see the effects of that brain drain right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, 100%. And we're seeing the government essentially just not know what, it's kind of scratching their heads over what, but these doctors, they want to find work, they want to get out, they want to find good, they want to find,
they want a contract.
They want an actual contract. And it's just, but it goes even beyond just physicians. I mean, as a McEwen student, as a university student, I've talked to a number of folks in the nursing program, and I don't think I've talked to a single one who isn't at the very least considering leaving the province as soon as they get their degree, which is, that's terrifying. It's, but
it is, yeah.
It's become very difficult to even get into that line of work right now under this government. But that's, I wanted to get your thoughts real quick on, with Minister Shandro. It was funny. They're shifting around their cabinet today. We mentioned that earlier.
Trying to make the best of a bad bunch.
I think if you wanted to maybe give say Tyler Shandro a new job, let's just put him in the let's let him try to negotiate with municipalities. For heaven's sakes, get him out of the position of health minister while we're in the middle of a pandemic. 90% of our physicians have they have no confidence in him.
Yeah, 98. So here's something really interesting. So when the AMA put the vote out to its membership to ratify the agreement of the change in their pay under the NDP, they had something like a third of their members responded. And so a third of their members responded. I think 70% were in favor of it or something like that. And so it was ratified for all members. So we're talking about a vote taking about your pay, right? Your actual means of living. A third of them showed up. I mean, I talked to doctors about it at the time, and they were like, are you serious? Like, of course it was that low because doctors are busy. Like, they're busy doing paperwork. They don't have time to keep up with every single thing that the AMA is doing on their behalf. And I was like, okay, I'll take that as gospel. But for that vote, for the vote on non-confidence, I think 66%, something like that, of doctors actually responded to that question. So twice as many doctors wanted to weigh in on whether they had confidence in the health minister than on their own pay. And they voted like 98.6% or something non-confidence in the Minister of Health. So that tells you how broken that relationship is and why we are seeing stories every single day of doctors putting in their notice that they just want to go and work somewhere that the blood, sweat, and tears that they put into their profession will be respected. And we're going to pay the consequences of that damaged relationship.
100%. And that's
especially rural Alberta.
Especially rural Alberta.
Yeah, it's hard to recruit there in the first place, and this will make it worse.
Oh yeah, I mean we're already seeing the first signs of it, and it's just going to keep spreading to other municipalities. It's just going to. I mean, this is, you know, the, like we just the trouble is just kind of getting this out to folks to let them know, you know, this doesn't have to be like this to rural Albertans who are essentially getting stepped on right now by this government. You know, I mean, this is I have to imagine this is not what many people voted for who voted UCP at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hear people say that all the time. Like they go, "Hey, you know, this is one that was not in the platform. He signed, you know, this fancy little healthcare guarantee as like a prop on stage. Um, you know, why can't I do something about that?" And you know, that is tough. You know, the important thing is that people have to know. So what's one of the things that keeps coming up in, you know, across Twitter and Facebook threads and stuff is the government talks about these angry letters that they get, right? They feel like it's unfair. That's the overwhelming sentiment about these letters is like, I felt like it was mean, and I felt like some people even find them threatening, and like, God forbid someone actually sends a threat to a government minister, because you know, neither do I want someone being threatened, nor do I want someone that it's like just speaking perhaps over candidly in a
Well,
moment, get in trouble by the law. So, but you can tell that these letters at all showing up, it threatens the feeling of entitlement of the government, and that they feel like they should be able to do like whatever they want without any measure of accountability. And so letters matter, phone calls matter. They have to track all of these things. These things all go into their government databases. They are required to respond. They're supposed to respond within 30 days, but I'm sure that that is like, that timeline has been thrown out. But that doesn't mean that their responsibility to respond has been removed, because it has not. But people are doing other things, right? People are like going to MLA's offices and writing messages in chalk, because writing in chalk on the sidewalk is not against the law. It's not permanent. It's not graffiti. The rain will come and we'll wash it away. It's okay. Um, but even this sidewalk graffiti is seen as like, you shouldn't be able to do that. I, the minister of whatever, or I, the UCP MLA or whatever, believe that like this is somehow like more than what I think you should have a right to do, even though you have a right to do it. And so making these ministers and these MLAs uncomfortable where they go, I think is really powerful. And lots of people are doing it. You know, it's not just a few people. We saw like the stories of the safe return in September rallies that were happening across the province on Friday, just this past Friday, at various MLA's offices. You know, it was across the news because people were showing up in like droves. Like there were, I feel like there was more than 100 people that showed up at the Sherwood Park MLA's office. There were messages left in Fort Saskatchewan, in Vegreville, in like Lacombe, in Red Deer. Like people are obviously very stressed and taking, you know, taking this action into their own hands as well. They have a right to. Um, and you know, like but we definitely like, it would be good to see some wins. It would be nice to see the government actually respond to its own citizenry and you know, do something, because otherwise people start to feel more helpless, and then you know, the options that people resort to when they feel helpless can be very damaging. And so I don't want to see that for anyone. And so it's good to remind like ourselves and each other that um, that there are completely legal things that you can do, like writing your MLA and calling your MLA's office and calling Jason Kenney. Like you can do these things to put the pressure on, and we see that the pressure takes an effect, right? And I sometimes these ministers can't actually manage that amount of pressure, and you end up with Tyler Shandro screaming at a doctor on his
For a meme.
oh my gosh, on his driveway. And you know that means that that like this has an impact. This has an impact. And we have to challenge the government when they try to tell us that we don't have a right to do these things, and they try to shame us for for simply phoning and writing our government. Like that's wild. That is absolutely wild. And like none of us should be silent about that. You know, like I don't want to be like shamed and threatened into being silent. And so, you know, the more that we can sort of amplify each other being like having a stand on something and wanting to like share our, you know, our unhappiness about something that the government is doing, I think it's important because it's easy for the government to try to make you feel alone when they target private citizens on things like social media. So, you know, like strength in numbers is always the way to go.
Yeah, and you know like you mentioned, you know, putting pressure on, you know, not just Jason Kenney and not even just on the cabinet, but just on your local MLAs. You know, and I think we're seeing with these, you know, this set of MLAs is a real is it, you know, like there's an irony in when the UCP talks about useless bureaucrats, and the useless bureaucrats to them are of course public servants. Essentially, they are like, you know, public sector workers. Uh,
Yeah,
they built this case on why their wages should be cut or their position should just be
yeah,
cut off. And you know, but the irony is that I find many of these MLAs, they're themselves to be useless bureaucrats. I mean, they don't understand. They don't even seem to understand why it is that the taxpayers are paying their salaries. They're there to represent their constituents. You know, I look to particularly the riding Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville, which you were formerly the MLA of, and you know the difference between our current MLA Jackie Armstrong Hominiuk and, you know, just putting aside politics, putting aside policy, and just the willingness to be involved in the constituency, to be present, to be listening, to, you know, to take notes, to understand what, to be in any way in touch with what your constituents are after. The difference between the two when you were in office and her right now is just night and day. I mean, you know, I mean, I have to say, you were just such a hardworking, incredible MLA. You know, just your work ethic and just willingness to get out there and to listen to people and to talk to people, and, you know, what are your concerns. I mean, again, we just don't see that from Jackie. But this extends. I think this is a province-wide issue. It's not even just within.
lots of people in rural Alberta are experiencing that. And this is not something that is like, part of it might have something to do with geography. Certainly rural constituencies are like extraordinarily larger than urban constituencies. But like I was able to show up, right? Like if you care about your job and you put your job first, these are not impossible things. And it's also not impossible to talk to people that are protesting outside of your office. Like you make a real decision as to how you treat someone who's angry. Because you know what? In politics, you're never going to have 100% of the people happy 100% of the time. Like you'd probably be lucky at like 50% of the people happy like 10% of the time. Like honestly, it's a real slog. and which is understandable because you're constantly doing things that like have either small or large effects on people's lives, and they're going to have different impacts on different people. So but there is a so I'll tell you a story. I like telling stories. I don't tell enough stories. I talk too much in like large ideas. So we had passed the Climate Change Leadership Act, right? The Climate Leadership Act. So part of that was introducing a market-wide carbon tax. And so I had this guy come in, and he's like an investment broker or something in Fort Saskatchewan. And he came into the office like screaming, like just absolutely unhinged. And so he was swearing, swearing at swearing at staff, swearing at me. And he actually like scared my staff. And so that's obviously not a good thing. Like there, you shouldn't tolerate that. But she called the cops. So, and like God bless her, I wouldn't fault her for calling the cops. But I said to the person working at the time, I said, like, let me try and talk to him. So I invited him into my office, and like Lord knows, in the old office that was on street level, that a person that can't get upstairs would be able to come into easily. I brought him into my office, and I was like, like, I'm not gonna tolerate your verbal abuse, but I absolutely want to know what your concerns are. And he was like, and he tried swearing again, and I was like, no, no, no. Like, if you do that, you will have to leave. So if you apologize for like calling me those names, I will absolutely sit down and talk to you. And so he like very begrudgingly apologized, and like, sort of came down a couple of notches. And so I asked Kathy to cancel the, the call to the cops. Because at that point I was like, okay, like I can manage this. So anyway, so he sat down and we talked about like, you know, is this going to hurt oil and gas? And is this going to hurt investment? Is this going to hurt companies doing business? Are these hurting? And like, he's worried about his own lifestyle, and whether what it's gonna do to that. And so I sat down and I talked to him for like an hour, and he had his viewpoints, and he was gracious enough to listen to some of mine. And like maybe 6 months later or so, we ended up sitting at the same table at a Chamber of Commerce dinner, and he was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Like last time we saw each other was not super great." I was like, "Well, yeah, no, it's okay." And he was like, "Let me, pour you a glass of champagne." And so like, he had a bottle of champagne that he had paid for, and so he was like super kind to share with me. And like it just demonstrated that we might not see eye to eye on very large issues, but just inviting someone in and showing them like just common decency and treating them like someone who is valuable enough to have your time is like so powerful. And she could go out to the sidewalk where people are talking and saying like, I want my kid who's disabled to have supports in classrooms. I don't want my child going to school sick to mean that like grandma and grandpa are being put at risk for getting COVID. I want to have publicly available healthcare that isn't being decimated and carved apart because rich people want like a piece of pie over here to be profitable. um I want to value people over profits. It is possible to go outside, bring those people inside, and listen to their concerns. And you will probably learn something. You might not agree. You might have to tell them, like, well, this is the direction of the government. And, like, absolutely, I will try and incorporate, like, your concerns. I will see, like, what I can do to try and make things better. Sometimes you have to be honest about not being able to, like, do the thing that they want you to do. But calling the cops on people that are just putting sidewalk chalk outside of your office is ridiculous. Having, like, messages everywhere on social media that basically, like, makes you feel bad before you even post something is so chilling on your democratic right to have a voice with your elected representative. Messages of, like, we're not going to tolerate A, B, and C. And they're not, we're not talking about bullying. We're talking about just having a difference of opinion is really why a lot of people end up getting blocked by their UCP MLAs. When a representative creates that sort of adversarial relationship with their own constituency, it's not good for anyone. Like, it not only has an impact on that person's rights to talk to their elected representative, but it's not good for the representative either. Because they can't make thoughtful decisions about the votes that they are passing in the legislature if they have not listened to the people that they're whose lives they're affecting. And that is really sad. It's really sad. I don't think that that seat is mine. I don't think that seat belongs to anyone, but it certainly hurts me to know that there is not someone present in that constituency and shared issues with other constituencies where people feel like they have just, like, basic respect, that someone will come and talk to you, not just, like, take a picture with you because you're good for their social media. That's a real loss. That's a real loss.
Yeah.
But like, you do what you can to try and ask for better. You can always ask for better. They're there for 4 years, right? So no one has to not ask for better for that entire 4 years, right? Because she's going to get paid no matter what.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to stop that, unless she doesn't show up to, like, the legislature and they, like, dock her $100 pay, or, like, that's probably still the same number. She will get paid no matter what. So every single person can absolutely ask for better over that entire time, and not feel bad about it. Like, it's, you don't just say, like, well, I can't get a hold of her, I guess I'll just wait till 2023 and, like, I can vote her out then. Because some UCP MLAs are saying that. They're like, oh, well, if you don't like it, well, you can just vote against me in 2023. No and no. Actually, it is my legal right to ask for better from you for 4 years. So, that is ongoing, because they're going to pass laws for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to change things for 4 years. The province is going to change in 4 years. There will be new battles to go and wage every day. And that person's not going away unless they step aside. And there was a by-election. They will be there. And, like, just have to, like, keep being relentless. I'm always open for second chances, Aidan. I am always happy to give someone the benefit of the doubt. And that, like, I hope that one day that, like, Jackie Armstrong Hominick is going to, like, walk out that door and be like, hey, everybody, I care about September too. Why don't we order some pizza? We can all go inside and I can listen to your concerns. I am like an eternal optimist, which is why I'm a New Democrat.
I'm just you put that picture, and and like you, when you, especially when you were telling that story about you and that rather that rather abrasive fellow, like that just from how I've known you for so long. I've never heard that story before, but that just seems like so like that's one thing you're always so talented for, and I just yeah, I'm kind of trying to picture Jackie doing anything remotely like that, or not even just Jackie, honestly, but many of these UCP MLAs just don't want to, who just don't want to. I mean, you always hear conservatives when they talk about college campuses and like they're trying to censor the battle of ideas and such and such.
Yeah.
Well, how about where it actually matters in the real world, where these folks are outside of your constituency office. No, they're not being violent, they're not being threatening, but they want better. They want better representation, and they want a government that is not stepping on them at every turn.
You didn't have to end up with a nickname of MIA MLA. Like that is not good. And she could undo that if she wanted to. Everyone has the power to to do better, right? If you know better, you do better. Isn't that like Maya Angelou?
Somebody. Yeah.
Oprah. Someone who I think it is Maya Angelou. If you know better, you do better. And that's what it's supposed to be, right? Like that's certainly what I think you and I aspire to, right? Like, why do you go to school?
Yeah.
Because not only are you gonna like hopefully get a job in an industry that you want to be in, but like learning allows you to do better because you know better. What was I listening to today? Oh my gosh, I signed up for the free Indigenous Studies course that you can do through the University of Alberta. Is it okay to mention the University of Alberta here? Okay.
We're friends with their.
Okay. So yeah, like you can take like a 12-week course, and every week is like 2 hours of study or something like that. So anyway, I mean I've been doing the coursework, and I was passing the encampment that's just down the hill from where I live. Don't ask me to pronounce the name because I don't know how, so I don't want to be that person. But at any rate, there are like probably 150 tents that are down there. And there's like a big sign on the side of the street, and it says, "This is native land." And so a lot of people that are sleeping rough, that who are obviously not being looked after in a housing system, are down there, and it's this whole course of basically like how did we get here? Why is it that we have such a challenge doing things that prioritize people in such a way that they have basic things like a roof over their head, and these these things like, why did I run why did I get involved with the NDP? Why did I run for the NDP? Because like I care about doing something about these things. I care about having affordable housing that that sees that as a solution to other issues. I care about funding for post-secondary education and making sure that everybody has opportunities to even do that in the first place. Because as a New Democrat, education is important. equitability is important. Um, having people actually like armed with the tools and the critical thinking skills that will allow them to like make the world better and actually like do really hard and heavy lifting to deal with things like climate change and deal with things like creating an economy that more people can benefit from. Like these are why these are things why I'm a new Democrat, and why I'm really glad that you're involved with your school, but really concerned about the cuts that have already started happening to post-secondary institutions, and it's going to get worse.
Yep.
Like, I do not understand why I'm not hearing more about the cuts that are happening in post-secondary. So for what's the word? Anyway, to like compare sizes of things. that's the part of me that like obviously is, you know, needs to go to school more. But anyway, so Thomas Lukaszuk, he did cuts like 10 years ago. So pretty bad cuts. 8 years ago, maybe? No, 10. It was about 10 years ago. So he cut $50 million from the post-secondary budget. And people absolutely lit their hair on fire. He still did it, but people never forgave him. So much so that even though he lost in 2015, even though he's been like Jason Kenney's worst nightmare for like almost 4 years, he still cannot escape what he did to post-secondary at the time. He went to somewhere in like the Okanagan where former minister and NDP MLA, longtime NDP MLA, former leader of the party, Brian Mason, was at. He has a property over there. They were like sharing a glass of wine in like a socially distanced picture, and people were absolutely like besides themselves that Brian Mason was taking a friendly photo with Thomas Lukaszuk, because lots of people that commented on those pictures were talking about how they lost their jobs because of those cuts, because of programs that were cut. Like the damage was huge and significant. And so people felt like it was a traitorous thing for a former NDP minister to be sharing a glass of wine and like not taking that more seriously, I guess. So that was a $50 million cut. The size of cuts that are coming to Alberta post-secondary education, the total over 4 years, is going to be something in the magnitude of $130 million. Do you know what the number is off the top of your head?
I know for the fact that it's above 100 million.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you get to a certain point at which it doesn't even matter how high the number is, because it just shows a complete disregard for, like the UCP. They, again, like I was mentioning, they like to talk about economic literacy and how, the NDP, they just don't understand economics, they don't understand business, they don't understand the profit, yada yada, all that nonsense. The U of A alone contributes 5% of this province's GDP, annual GDP. Alone, just the U of A alone.
Wow.
This is
that's fascinating.
The idea that the post-secondary education is not a massive economic driver that should be invested in.
Yeah. That it's just treated as a cost. Yeah.
It's just a cost just for, these little teens with green dyed hair to go and take the bachelor's. That's what they
Aidan, they do like the most, their protests, like their environmental protests and like caring about, about BIPOC people, like that's just more than the UCB wants to manage.
No, they just don't even seem to, like, it's just this antagonism towards students. The idea of,
Yeah,
the idea of, it's like it's un-Albertan to, work in any industry other than the oil and gas sector, you know, and it just blows my mind every time. I mean, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. And sorry, I'll let you in a second, but
no, it's okay. It's okay. Look, go on, and I'll get there.
we're in the middle of a pandemic, and they have
Yeah,
not stopped they have not reinstated the freeze on tuition.
right,
They're still cutting costs,
right,
still causing mass layoffs of university staff at a time when
totally.
on deck are needed. I mean, and sorry, what were you going to say?
No, it's so true. So I was going to ask you. So part of the UCP platform was to the student fees for the student unions optional,
Oh yes,
right?
yeah.
Right. So it's fascinating. So I would like to hear your perspective on this because actually I'll start there. So they want to make it optional. What are your thoughts?
Well, and like they just again, it's this. It almost again like it almost comes back to it's just this antagonism of students. Like student unions.
Right. Yeah. Why should you have a funded voice?
It exists
Right?
to
Yeah.
advocate for the rights of students, for the rights and interests of students. Whether it comes to
Yes.
tuition, whether it comes to textbooks, whether it comes to any kind of technical issue, regardless, big or small. That is what So at McEwen, of course, we have SAMU, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
we have elections, of course, as all universities and colleges do, and and that's the idea that should be optional. I mean, you're a union that represents all that's there to represent all students.
Yeah. So the reason why I ask is because not only is it important, right? Like you hit it right on the nose. Um, that it allows you to have a voice in decision making, and to say that you're not allowed to have that anymore is really making a statement as to whether you should be able to advocate for change as a collective unit,
Yeah.
or if you have to like deal with these things as like just one, many individual voices. So the thing about Jason Kenney floating that idea of making this optional is absolutely corollary to the bill that they just introduced to make union dues optional by workers who it's currently not optional for. Um, so you're a registered nurse. Right now, you pay a certain like percent in union dues, and so that allows you the ability to bargain for wages collectively, bargain for safety collectively, bargain for pensions collectively, and also if something happens on at your job that you don't agree with, say you're punished, say you're fired, say someone changes your shift, say someone doesn't pay you for certain hours, sick hours, whatever, you have a union that you can go to and say, like, I believe I'm being treated unfairly. And so I would like you to help represent me so that uh, I have the strength of many behind me. I have my entire, like, all of the membership, like me and my 35,000 friends have something to say about this. So they want to make those fees optional. And not only is that going to create a bunch of red tape, which they claim to not like, obviously it's red tape where they would prefer it. So, but it's really the talking about optional fees for student unions is where was that trial balloon was like, are people going to have an issue with this? Because obviously, if you start to take like person by person by person, you take away these fees,